Let's see here. All right. So, chapter 6 is on the economic transformations and commerce and consequences with this. So, when we look at this, we're really going to be talking a lot about the Portuguese Empire, Spain and the Philippines, the East India companies, and then Asians kind of commerce that takes place. So we're really going to be looking at commerce within the Indian Ocean here, and this is talking from 1450 to about 1750 here. Okay, so Europeans want commercial connections, okay, with Asia. They want European connections with Asia here. So, sorry about that. There is a route to Asia that is desired. It is reason behind really a lot of different trends. When we look behind this, behind the wall, but commerce is going to join really as the twin creators of a global network. We'll see things like the transatlantic trade system being very significant within the world that we're going to live in. The slave trade, it's only part of that international trading networks. We've already discussed a little bit the ideas behind the Columbian Exchange and the movement of products and goods from Afro-Eurasia to the Americas and vice versa. And so what are we going to know? We're going to know about the really the trend of Europeans breaking into the Indian Ocean trade, American silver allowing for greater European participation in that commerce. We'll talk a little bit more in this chapter about fur trading and trapping, how Europeans are increasingly prominent in the long distance trade routes, and then obviously we'll talk more about the commerce and the empire and the two forces that drive really globalization between the time period of 1450 and 1750. So let's take a look at Europeans and Asian commerce. All right. Of these things, okay, we have people like Columbus and Vasco da Gama who are both seeking a route to Asia, looking at two different routes that are available to them. Number one, okay, da Gama is going to head down the coast of Africa and push his way into what is the Indian Ocean. Okay? And then Columbus sailing west, trying to go across that route, knowing the world was round and trying to get to Asia that way. Motivation above all of these things, okay, is wealth. But there are a bunch of other underlying ideals. Okay? The most immediate motivation is going to be the desire for spices. Okay? The Eastern products are also going to be sought, things like silk and those types of things. Spices are important to this group. Cinnamon, nutmeg, mace, cloves. One of those especially being pepper. Those would be used as condiments. They'd be used as preservatives to preserve, things like meats, medicines, and what's known as aphrodisiacs. And other products might be Chinese silk, Indian cottons, medicinal ideals. That might be something that would have been a point of emphasis. Emeralds, rubies, sapphires, all those things are in great demand. And so the route to Asia is desired in order to gain really the desire for spices. That's the main reason, but there are others that come about that. Underlying the growing interest in Asia was a more general kind of recovery of the European civilization following the Black Death. We understand that during this time, the European population is starting to grow again after the Black Death. And so in places like Spain, Portugal, England, and France, those are the main four of the Western European powers. they're learning how to kind of tax their subjects more efficiently and effectively, build substantial military forces, and equip themselves with things like gunpowder and weaponry. Cities are growing up really fast too. Some of them, like in places like England and the Netherlands, are becoming really centers of international commerce and trade. And so that gives birth to economies that's based on kind of a market exchange, meaning they are trading. So these large cities that are now coming into play are going to be huge aspects for this. Okay? Also, for many centuries, the Eastern goods had trickled into the Mediterranean through the Middle East and the Indian Ocean trade. So groups of people like the Muslims become the middleman in Egypt, or the Italians in Venice. And so they have to pay for those goods. But as we've talked before in the past, the payment for those goods is usually going to require more and more. So not only that, another problem would be that when the Portuguese first do, get to Asia, there they are forced to pay kind of in cash for Eastern goods. They are not the European goods is nothing that the East wants. They are undesirable in a lot of ways. So because of this, you have to use other ways. So you are constantly trading with money, with cash or silver or gold. And that's a problem. But eventually the Portuguese do find their way into the ancient Asian trade, which becomes an important aspect to what they are going to try to do later on. So the Portuguese Empire of Commerce in the Indian Ocean. There is a diverse group of people that is within that, very ethnically diverse in this area. Africans, Arabs, Persians, Indians, the Malays, the Chinese, and others are all going to be traded amongst them. Now, mostly it is going to be the Muslim Empire, through hailing and for many separate communities. Places like also Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, Jews, all those groups are going to be a part of this. The Portuguese, had they just simply sought to participate in that peaceful trading, they certainly could have done so, but it was quickly apparent that their goods were very crude and unattractive to that group. So they were forced to use cash. But they also learned that the Indian Ocean ships were not very much, were not well equipped with things like cannons or any type of defenses. So the Portuguese ships were well equipped to really take over the Indian Ocean. Their ships were built better, they were larger, and not only that, they had cannons on them. So those cannons could be used to bombard port cities or other ships on the ocean. So we start to see this idea of piracy that takes place. So the Portuguese see an opening for their ships to outgun and outmaneuver the naval forces there. And the military advantage allows the Portuguese to quickly establish several different fortified bases. Mombasi in East Africa, Hormuz in the entrance of the Persian Gulf, and Goa on the west coast of India. You'd also see them in Malacca in Southeast Asia and Macau on the south coast of China. All of those had been obtained through bribery and negotiations with Chinese authorities. Or excuse me, all those are going to be obtained with force, with the exception of Macau. The Portuguese have this idea of a trading post empire. They aim to control commerce, not necessarily large territories of population. So to do so by force of arms rather than any kind of economic competition. And they take to piracy. They use this ideal. They aren't looking to control, their goal is to control commerce, not areas. Different from maybe what they had in mind within the Americas. At the height, they control about half of the spice trade to Europe, and that's fairly significant. But over time, okay, with the Indian Ocean trade patterns, what we start to see is the Portuguese become assimilated into the ancient patterns. So if you were to be assimilated into ancient patterns, essentially what you are is you are becoming part of what that group was. They don't necessarily see themselves as Portuguese anymore, but they instead start to meld themselves to, maybe it was a Goan style, or a Macau style. So they start to marry into those cultures and therefore become a part of it. So they don't necessarily change the way shipping or any of that worked, but they're simply becoming part of that group. And so that was the real thing that you start to see. Asian traders are going to start marrying many of the, the Portuguese traders will start to marry into groups of Asian infusion or groups. So they would maybe marry into Chinese or Indian. And so hundreds of Portuguese will escape the control of that government altogether. So here you can see territory under the control of different groups. You see in the orange, we're talking about the orange area is all territory under Portuguese control. You can see it there in West Africa and East Africa. You can see where Goa is. Territory under Dutch control. The Dutch will actually be a huge player in this later on. And then obviously Spanish control there in the greens in the Philippines. What it doesn't talk about is English portions yet, but we will talk a little bit more about the English ideal. But this map here shows kind of the map of how they control different areas within that within their group. All right, this is obviously we know spices are a major portion of this 15th century depiction of the gathering of pepper in southern India kind of illustrates the modern era of Europeans gaining kind of dialect or direct access to this for the first time. So on the right there, the man in white there would be a European, and the Indians who are bringing in pepper to these groups or to this man, and they'd be collecting it and controlling that spice trade there. So Spain and the Philippines. Spain is going to be the first to challenge Portugal's position as they establish their own control of Asian trade. Their first base is going to be at the Philippine Islands. It's named after the Spanish king, Philip II. And there they find that there are thousands of different islands. Okay, in this, so we're looking at this area in green here. Okay, if you guys are unaware, there's thousands of different islands. You can kind of see, okay, that area there. And so thousands of different islands. Each one of them is small and organized under competitive chiefdoms. There is no king. There's no one style. And this kind of allows the Spanish to really kind of take over easily in these areas. Run from colonial Mexico, the Spanish conquest becomes very easy and often bloodless. Okay? Sometimes it involves gifts or alliances with another gunpowder weapons or kind of a Catholic ritual that was there. The region of, though, is very little interest to people like the Chinese, okay, and Japan, which are really the major powers in that area. We see conditions and proximity to China and the Spice Islands, very small military, weak societies there as we look at it. The missionary campaign made Filipino society really the only major Christian outpost within Asia. So now you start to see Christianity creeping through and creeping in with this different ideals to this. And then the Spanish abuses, they force relocation. In reality, they force relocation amongst these groups. They are forced to pay tribute and taxes, as well as things like unpaid labor and also slavery that becomes a part of this. Women who played a very prominent role in religious purposes and healing purposes in the Philippines prior to the Spanish arriving are now reduced to really nothing. They are no longer a part of this, and it becomes more of a Catholic ritual, and men take over the roles of women. Manila will become the center of trade with a very, very diverse population here as well. By 1600, it's really a flourishing and cultural diverse city. You have more than 40,000 inhabitants. Some of those are going to be some of those are going to be a big part of these different ideals here. And we start to see that 20,000 people in the year 1603 are going to be killed. Nearly the entire Chinese population on the island itself will be massacred by the Spanish in 1603. It's following the ideals of hostility and discriminatory treatment. So you'd see periodic revolts that existed within this time period. The Dutch East India Company. Real quick, guys, are you guys seeing just the one slide, or are you seeing two? Just one? Okay. Hopefully it's recording that one slide. I don't know. Okay. So the East India Companies. This is the Dutch and the British. The Dutch and English competition both enter in the early 17th century, and they really displaced the Portuguese for good. Those two Northern European powers are going to often by force get rid of all things that were Portuguese in this area. The Dutch had become a really highly commercialized urban society, and their business skills and their maritime shipping operations, all of those things become very powerful. The British and Dutch, unlike the Portuguese, organized their Indian Ocean ventures through private companies. So you have the Dutch East India Company and the British East India Company. Those two groups are private, all right? They are able to go out and receive charters from their governments, and it grants them trading monopolies. So why is it different? This way, there is no interference from the government. These groups can go out and focus on their own and lead themselves into different ideals. So they established parallel trading empires. The Dutch focused on the islands of Indonesia, and the English focus on India. It leads us into kind of future ideals and future dealings with the English and India there. By far, at first, the Dutch are much more successful with these ideals and how they work through these things. The Dutch are going to monopolize shipping, okay? Kill or enslave very many people. They are going to control the production of things like cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, mace. And they seize the small producing islands and force people to sell only to the Dutch. And what that does for them is it allows them to really kind of keep their ideals and kill or enslave a lot of people there. The British East India Company is not as well financed as the Dutch. They really have three major trade settlements there. One of those is settlements in India. They have Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras. And the British Navy will gain control of the Arabian Sea, and the Persian Gulf as well. And that gives them some benefits to these ideals here. They will negotiate with local rulers for peaceful establishment of trade bases. And Britain will trade pepper and other spices, but cotton textiles become much more important, especially in places like Europe and the Americas. The cotton thing becomes king for British, and it will rule what they do later on, and it will rule within the colonies as well in the Americas that we'll see later on. This is various East India companies, British, French, and Dutch, representing the major vehicle of European commerce in Asia during the early modern era. It's a wall painting that dates back to 1778. It's titled "The East Offering Its Riches to Britannia." Okay, it's going to be hung in the main offices of the British East India Company. All right. Lastly, guys, we're going to talk about Asians and Asian commerce. European presence was far less significant in Asia than it was in the Americas and in Africa. All right. As much as they tried, it was less significant. It was limited the control to the Philippine Islands, parts of Java, and a few of the Spice Islands that existed. In reality, the Asian still controlled their own commerce within these areas. Japan and Europe is divided pretty high. All right. And so early on, the daimyo, which was a group of basically warriors, okay, who separated their ideals amongst those groups, and Europeans were welcomed at first under the daimyo. Eventually, what happens is the Europeans will, the daimyo will all join under one shogun, the Tokugawa shogun, and then they will be dismissed from Japan. They dismiss all types of European ideals. So that means Catholicism, Christianity, anything like that. And so all of those things took place. Within Japan and Southeast Asia, the Japanese merchants move into Southeast Asia and they use violent means to take over. But Japan is very, very much evident that they are not involved with any of these merchants, the Japanese merchants. They actually send letters to groups within these small islands down below that says, look, if you capture Japanese merchants and they say they're acting on our behalf, they are not. Punish them to the fullest extent of the law. And so the Asian merchants kind of continue to operate despite the European presence that existed there. So it's not quite the same thing as it would have been. Okay. Any questions on that, guys?